some of our regulars here.
Yes, well, I'm really excited to be with you today because I normally do this presentation in groups of 75, so it's not able to be very discussion oriented. So I feel like that's a limitation of doing it that way. So I was excited to come today where we would be able to have more of a discussion and more dialogue with each other as a group, and you'll have some dialogue in pairs as well. So, well, let's get started. I'll introduce myself, and then we'll do a quick round robin to introduce ourselves as well. So my name is Sam Jones, and I teach here at GSE. I teach the student development class, and I'm really passionate about student development. I think a very significant part of student development is career development and the role that career plays in our lives. But student development is certainly bigger than that. I have my doctorate from GSE, so I'm an alum of the program and a huge fan of the program. And I also, in addition to my work here, I work next door at the Wharton School, where I work in the MBA Career Management Office. So I've spent thousands and thousands and thousands of hours talking to people about their careers and seeking to understand that dimension. And then I also do research in the space of career identity and work identity and this topic of calling. And there's a collaborator that I have at Wharton that I work with. So that's a thumbnail sketch of my background, and we'll share more along the way. But why don't we do a quick around the room where you can share your name and just what program you're in here.
Hi everyone, my name is Anchal and I'm from Learning Sciences and Technologies program, master's student, first year.
My name is Marissa. I'm in International Educational Development and I'm a second year.
My name is Martin Fu. I'm from TESOL and I'm in the first year.
My name is Gabby. I'm also from TESOL program, and currently I'm interested in special children education. I think this could be where my passion lies. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Hello everyone, my name is Minjia and I'm from ICC program, Intercultural Communication, and I'm first year.
Great. Welcome. So you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm Allison Vibrett. I am the GA with Amy in the Office of Career and Professional Development, but I'm also a first-year master's student in the higher education program.
Amy Benedict, Director of GSE Career and Professional Development, also an alumna of our higher ed program, and my research is in the area of the impact of international internships on undergraduate college students' career development. And I've been doing this work for 31 years, and I've been here at Penn for a little over 2.
Great. Well, again, welcome everybody. One of the things we talk about broadly in the career space is this 2x2 matrix of success and satisfaction. When I think about working with a student, this is what we want to set them up for, is how can we maximize their preparation to be successful in whatever work they want to do. And success can be defined very differently by people. You know, some people define it, many people define it by the impact that they'll have through their work. Some people define it by the types of organizations they work for. Some people define it by the money that they make. Some people define it by the progress they make in their career. So I think when we talk about success, every person views success differently. But part of the process is helping people figure out what success means for them. And then the other metric is satisfaction. We want people to love their work. We want people to feel a sense of joy at work. There's a survey that's done every 2 years out of the University of Chicago called the General Social Survey. And it's of people in the US, and we ask hundreds of attitude questions from the survey. And an analysis I did in the survey, I looked at different components of a person's life: their health, the amount of money they make, their family situation, and put this into a statistical model and see, well, what drives happiness for people who live in the US? And many things drive happiness, but one of the largest driver of happiness is whether or not people are happy at work. And it makes sense because we spend so much time at work. So these are a set of decisions we want to help students get right in setting themselves up. So in today's session, we're going to talk about discussing why having a calling, a sense of calling and a mission matters. And we'll also, we're going to work on writing calling statements in this session. So let me start off by asking, when you think of the word calling, calling as it relates to work? What kind of ideas come to your mind? What is calling? Yes?
Just like something that you feel like you're meant to be doing.
Yes, you feel like you're meant to do it. It's just such a when I hear the word meant to, it's like almost you're compelled to do it, something inside of you. What else?
Something you can deeply connect with.
Yes, has this idea, it's like a deep connection to the work. Absolutely. What else?
Some things about my passion, and I would feel so rewarded if I do that.
Yes. It's like when I hear the word passion, it's something that really connects to like the deep emotional part of who we are, and like you said, it feels rewarding that you're doing that work. Absolutely. Anything else? Calling.
Sometimes I also think it might not make sense
Mm-hmm.
to other people at least.
Mhm.
Like there might not be a logical, like, why do you want to do that?
Right.
And sometimes it's unexplainable.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, I just feel like drawn to
You
it.
feel drawn to it. All right, well, good. Well, I think we're starting a good baseline of what calling means. So we did a study about calling with about 2,000 participants, and we looked at these three measures. We looked at amount of salary people made, we looked at how satisfied they were in their current jobs, and we looked at how satisfied they were with their career progression. And when we ran this statistical model where we controlled for age and gender and race and the type of work people did, this was the result, is people who had a high sense of calling, which is measured through a questionnaire, on average made $1 for every 86 cents somebody made who didn't have a strong sense of calling. On a 5-point satisfaction scale, they were about half a point more satisfied in the work that they did. And then again, when we looked at career progression satisfaction, they were more satisfied with how their career is progressing and evolving. Now this work, it's correlational, so it could mean that people who are rich are like, hey, I got a calling. Or people who are satisfied are like, yeah, I'm calling. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the calling led to these outcomes, but it was fascinating for us to discover that calling was associated with all of these outcomes in our study, and that's something that we see in other research. And so it made us just begin to pay more attention in the work that we do, at least with our MBA students and also with our GSE students, that if calling is leading to these positive outcomes of success and satisfaction, maybe we should be talking about it more and letting people decide, like, is this a way that is helpful as you think about your careers? Another thing that's really interesting about calling is there was a seminal article that was done in 1997 on calling. And at this point, there were about 15 peer-reviewed articles on calling. And now we're approaching 300 peer-reviewed articles. So there's been this acceleration of interest in the academy about viewing your job as a calling. And in this seminal study that was done in the late 90s, it was actually done here at Penn by faculty. And they found that people generally categorize their work into 3 categories. The first was a calling, and it's this idea, of things we were talking about. It's joyful. Some people thought about it as being socially useful, that they connected to it deeply. Other people focused on their work as a career. So this was about advancement. When you think of a traditional way of someone climbing a ladder, it was about achievement, which is great as well. And then other people, they viewed it more as a job. This is something, you do it and you get money for it, and if you won the lottery, you not do it anymore. So these were the 3 ways people viewed it. And they basically fell into a third. And in their initial research, they also found that it was associated with having a higher sense of meaning and satisfaction in the work that they do. So that's been a consistent theme when people view their work as a calling. They're more satisfied with it. Another just interesting phenomenon that we've seen actually in Wall Street is companies that are publicly traded on the stock exchange have to do what are called earnings calls. So how much money are they making each quarter, and they have to publicly talk about that. And analysts take these conversations, these public conversations, they record them, and they analyze the transcripts of these earnings calls. And we have found I think it's been a 1/3, a 30% increase on these earning calls of companies talking about things like purpose, mission, values, words that are really associated with calling. And I think some of it is paralleling that people want to have more meaning through their work. And so the workforces are putting pressure on companies to actually have to talk about and think about these things more. So we see it at the individual level, people having these benefits of calling, but we're also seeing it in this environmental level of organizations are thinking more about these topics. So it's really a theme that's growing among the world of work and the research and work. So if you wanted to write one thing down, this is what it would be. So we started a partnership with the Positive Psychology Center to do some studies on calling. And the first thing we had to do was define what we meant by calling. And we decided to use the term calling and mission, And the definition that we have for calling and mission is engaging in meaningful work that makes an impact. Engaging in meaningful work that makes an impact. And when we think about meaningful work, we thought that the word calling really captured that word. Things that are internal to you. There's an intrinsic motivation to why you would want to do it. It taps into your interests. It taps into what motivates you. It taps into your values. And it ultimately, it allows you to use your talents and your skills. And when talents and skills are developed, they become strengths. So it's really about this core of who you are and being able to utilize who you are in the work that you do. But we also found that there was this other aspect to having a sense of calling and mission, and it came in the terms of impact. So these were words like the mission, it's more external. It's the value you're adding to your organization. It's a sense of accomplishments. Maybe it's needed in the market or it's needed in a school system. It's results oriented. That we talked a lot about that it's social impact neutral, and what we meant by neutrality is that it would never be destructive. That some jobs have a very direct line to helping, right? You had mentioned wanting to help children with special needs. That's like a very direct line to helping. It's beautiful, and other people have more dotted lines to helping. I think of a friend of mine who works at a bank. And the way that he thinks about working at a bank is that we help financial systems work. And if financial systems don't work, nothing really works. So we need to do that. So it's more of an indirect way. Or also it could be about personal legacy. And where this definition came from is in our research, where we asked thousands of people about their callings. We asked them, write a sentence or two about what you think your calling was. And this pattern began to emerge of people writing something about meaningful work and their skills and their talents, and something about impact that they wanted to have. And so that began to surface for us as a way to think about calling. Well, I said that there's a couple hundred articles about calling now, and these are some of the benefits that are associated with calling in the broad research about calling. So they range from an increased sense of well-being. So people who say they have a sense of calling, they also have an increased sense of well-being. They're more likely to find meaning in their work. They're more planful and confident in their career decisions, probably because the calling gives a direction for the work that they're doing. They're more likely to expect positive outcomes in their desired career paths. They experience a stronger fit with their work. They're more committed to their jobs. So that's something organizations like about the calling side, is the commitment from the workforce. It can be a buffer against burnout, and it's associated with increased life satisfaction. So again, these studies don't necessarily say calling produces these, but we consistently see that they're related to one another. So it's such a great thing that I thought, we need to be talking more about this. But like all things that have benefits, calling can also have some dark sides. What do you think might be some of the dark sides to calling? Think of anything?
Maybe if you feel you have a calling, but you can't find the right job to associate with that.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the dark sides, is people feel like they have a calling, but they can't enact it.
Yeah.
And that leads to lower life satisfaction because of the frustration.
You might have high calling, but you might not have the skill set required to fulfill that. And also there might be no need in the market
Yes.
for a calling.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So again, you feel like you have this calling, but you can't enact it. You can't do it.
Or probably the calling will not result in a good financial reward. Like you like working, do that work.
Right.
But this work probably not pay well. So you will end living in a not very financially happy lifestyle.
Yes, which causes a lot of stress for people.
Yeah.
You know, another thing related to that is, let's say the calling could pay well, is that people feel such a reward for doing the work. They don't always negotiate for a salary or a raise that would be due to them because they're just so satisfied by the work itself. So that's also something they've seen. Yeah, you're really tapping into some. So there's 4 that the research says. So yes, high dissatisfaction when unable to pursue, for whatever reason. We've talked about some of them. Not being fairly compensated, because you love the work. But people who maybe don't love the work as much, that are working side by side with you, might be trying to negotiate for more raises at critical points. So that's something for us to be mindful of. And then the other 2 can be burnout. You love your job so much that you begin having this very imbalanced life, where you're working too much. Maybe you're not getting enough sleep or the right nutrition, or you don't have the right social support because your life is imbalanced. And then the other is rigid career decisions. And this is an important one to talk about because a career is, at its simplest definition, a career is a series of jobs that you will have over time. And ideally, with each job, you are able to enact your calling more. You have a new job and it encompasses more of your calling, and another job and it encompasses more of your calling. But sometimes people become so rigid that I have to have this type of job right now and only this type of job, that they don't see the progression and the stepping stones that a career can be. So making sure that the calling is helping to guide decisions and not limit decisions. I see, Amy, you're shaking your head as a career counselor.
I mean, as I think about, the conversations I have with students and even alumni about, I want this role. Great. You might need to start here to get there. I don't want to do that.
Right.
Well, okay, good luck with that.
Right. Right.
Here's some strategies. And
I'm 25 and I'm called to be a university president.
Right. or sometimes it's about the compensation. I think I should be making $60,000. You don't have any work experience. You just graduated from a master's. I'm not sure, but again, good luck with that.
Right. Right. All right, another thing I wanted to show about a sense of calling is that in the scale we use, so we used a scale to measure calling, and in this scale, it has actually 2 subscales. One is the presence of a calling, and the other is searching for a calling. And as you can see, when people are later in their career, they have found a calling and they're not looking for a calling anymore, which makes sense. But early on in the career, they start off together at the same level. People are searching, they don't really have a strong presence of a calling, they're trying to figure it out. And in data that we've looked at, we've found that probably someone in their early to mid-30s is when this inflection point starts to happen, where the blue line, the presence of a calling, kind of stabilizes, and the searching, people aren't searching anymore. And I'd like to share this slide because I don't want people, especially early on in their career, to feel this pressure that you have to figure it out right now. If you don't figure out what your calling is, you're not going to have any of these benefits that we just talked about. That's not the case. When we look at timelines, people are kind of searching for a while. They're searching typically into their early to mid-30s to really figure out what is it that they want to really do, and not so much do in a career, but as they think about what their talents and strengths are and the impact that they want their work to have. I think it clarifies over time, but the message here being, give yourself some time to figure it out, but spend the work to figure it out. These were some frequently used words when we asked people about their calling. These were from business people, but they use words like able to, love, want to, achieve, nouns. They had all sorts of industries they were working in, from education to financial services, and things they wanted to do, make things better, make things new, make things positive. So it's just interesting to see as people wrote about their callings, what kind of language they used to describe calling. So what I'd like to do now is kind of maybe pause for a few minutes and talk a little, just have a little discussion about some of the things that we've talked about in terms of calling. And then we're going to go into an activity, like a paired activity. But any questions or reactions you have just about calling right now? Yes?
One thing we haven't talked about is when you feel like your calling shifts.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I guess that like gives me trepidation, like going into a career and being like, this is my calling, and then I get there and it's like, oh,
Right.
wait a minute.
Right.
And then like, what do you do at that point when you're like entrenched? Well, I guess you're never really entrenched in a career. You can do it
Right.
any time, they say, but that's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, I think one of the things, I think it's a great question. I think it's important to separate the ideas of calling from an occupation. So not just saying like my calling is to be a high school teacher, or my calling is to be a university residence life director. So separating them out a little bit. And I find that when people make career pivots, they often are still trying to use the same set of strengths and interests they have, and they're often interested in the same type of impact, but the occupation is a vehicle for that. The occupation allows for the enacting of that. Now I would say as someone's going through their 20s and early 30s in our research, we might see some more major pivoting because people are still really trying to figure that out. But we see less pivoting as people progress in their careers. And some of it could be that there's less optionality to pivot, but some of it is people kind of figure out the rhythm of where to be. So to answer that, I think it's still like the calling element is similar, but the context, the actual job, the occupation is what changes.
The other thing I would add is sometimes it's the employer where you're working.
Mm-hmm.
So your calling stays core, but the place you're working or in addition to maybe the job you're doing isn't quite the right fit. So it might be finding a different organization to implement your calling. The other thing that I often find that relates to something Sam said is I think in every job you have, you also learn a little bit about what you like and what you don't like, so that in that next job you're trying to maximize what you like and minimize what you don't like. And some of that you just don't know until you're in the job.
Yeah. One of my former colleagues is really passionate about diversity and inclusion. And so for a period of her career, she worked for an organization called MLT, which helps prepare people who have traditionally not gotten an MBA to go into MBA programs. And then she came over to Penn to be a career counselor, and part of her work was still focusing on that population. And then she was recruited by a bank to focus on diversity candidates and recruiting diversity candidates. And now, after doing that for a while, she's working for an executive search firm that has some of these similar themes to them. So it's interesting, it's very different to work at a nonprofit organization, to a higher ed institution, to a bank, to now an executive search firm. But I would say her calling hasn't changed, but the optic of it would look like it really changed. That's a great question. What else? Any other questions? All right. Well, I want to do start off with a partner activity. And we're going to do a two-step process. And the goal of our process will actually be for you to write a calling statement. So at least draft an initial calling statement that's really helping to begin to be a guide for you. And we're going to start that process by doing an interview with each other to get a sense of what's important to you at work. And then we'll draw from that to have the statement. And then after we have the statement, we'll round out our time today by talking about how do you use this statement. And I think there's two really powerful ways to use the statement. One is in decision making about your career. And then the other is actually when you're interviewing. I think that there are ways to use the statement to talk about yourself and let an organization get to know you. And there's probably productive ways to do that and non-productive ways to do that. So we'll talk about both. But I'm going to hand out a sheet, and you'll each have about, probably about 9 minutes, because there's about 9 questions. So you'll be with a partner, and what you'll do is you'll interview your partner through these questions, and you'll write down the answers for them, and then you'll switch. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I will hand these out. The two of you want to be partners?
Yeah.
And if for some reason a question doesn't fit you, you just move on to the next question. So you can decide who will be the interviewer and who will be the interviewee. Would you put 9 minutes on your phone?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, of course. And I will walk around to answer any questions.
The first one,
Yeah.
All right. Let's I'll give you 10 or 15 more seconds to finish your thought.
Do you want to do this? Cheers. No. But I know it.
One of the reasons I think pausing to reflect is really important is in some of the most important education theories we have, like theories of self-efficacy, having the ability to pursue a goal, is being able to really step back and think about what is really important to me is central to that process. And I think I often don't take the time to do that. Some of us probably are more inclined to do it than others, but to just create some space to think about, okay, what is really important to me and how does that affect the career trajectory I'm setting for myself in this case. So let me just kind of open things up, and we'll ask a few people to just briefly share what is something from these questions that really stood out to you as, oh, this is really important to my career.
I think one of the ones that stuck out the most to me was, what do you consider the most important future contribution you'll make through your work? And I had a difficulty answering this question.
Sure.
And so I think that kind of that's why it stuck out to me, because it was like, it made me think about it and define contribution and like all these other things that had to go into this one seemingly simple question that I think could really shape where I end up in my career.
That's fantastic. That's a question to really keep coming back to. What else?
I was sort of thinking about the question around what words describe you best, because it forced me to think about, do these words that I embody connect with the career or calling that I see myself going into?
Right.
And do those things mesh?
That's great.
One interesting question for me was one person who has influenced your career. I had always thought about that person with respect and like the way he mentored me, but I did not actually think about the qualities I admired. So thinking about those qualities and being able to learn from that and maybe able to imbibe them in myself, I had never thought of that aspect.
Oh, that's great. What was one of the qualities?
Being courageous, to be honest with the team and with the other management.
That's great. Yeah, that courage to speak out. Right, how from our group in the middle?
Okay, so what do you really love to do at work? So for this question, I say I want to do public speaking. I want to talking to people, and I want to change people's personality during this work and having them realize what they want to do and how can they be better person.
That's great. That's right. It sounds like you really want to help people fulfill their potential, become better people. That's great. Anyone else?
This question also stood out to me because at first in our mind, I just think about the thing, what I hate to do at work. And then my partner helped me figure out what's something that I love.
You're already influencing someone's personality.
She
Yeah.
saying she doesn't like doing similar things day by day. So I think creativity might play an important part in your idea. And then she said she wants to spread different ideas to people. She wants to embrace different ideas. So I think probably journalism is a good fit for
Oh.
you. And she's thinking, yeah, I think so.
That's funny.
And intercultural communication, right?
Yeah, she's in intercultural communication.
Yeah. Great. So it sounds like variety is important to you.
Yeah.
Influencing people with ideas is important. Oh, that's great. Would either of you like to share in the back?
Maybe what is something you frequently thought about and still think about during the parenthood? I think this question stood out to me
Okay.
because I feel that if there is a calling in my job, but I didn't pursue that calling, I will keep thinking about it. Why am I depart from the calling? Why am I unable to follow my calling? Maybe I will see the distance between my reality and the calling for me and try to narrow the distance between the calling and my reality.
Absolutely. That's a really great application of calling. Really, really excellent. Anyone else want to share? Okay. All right. Well, what I want to do next is transition from the activity we just did of kind of pulling things out of ourselves that are important and transition them to writing a calling statement. And this is the template that we saw the participants in our research study use. So we didn't give them this template, but there are a large number of people who just naturally used it. And their phrases started off with, my calling and mission, or my calling, is to use. And then they would fill in like a strength, a skill, an interest, something that motivates them, a value, a talent, things. So it could be one or two things. It doesn't have to just be one, but something they wanted to use. And then they'd use the phrase in order to, and it was this other phrase that was about change, impact, to increase something, to accomplish something, to build something, to inspire, to add value. So it's this connection between who we are and the type of impact that we hope to have. And let me give you an example of a student, and then we're going to take a minute or two to draft something. So I was doing a career advising session with a student once, and we were doing a mock interview. And in this mock interview, she was actually preparing to go to an interview later that week. And it was for this company that, if you can imagine, it was like the Uber for laundry. So you have dirty laundry, you get on your app, they come, they pick up your laundry, and the next day it arrives at your home, and it's clean, it's folded, and so this is the company she went to work for. And I knew that she was excited about it. So we did this mock interview, and I asked the question you would always ask in a mock interview. What do you think is the leading question? Exactly, yeah. Yeah, either tell me about yourself, but it was like, why are you interested in working for this company? And she just gave this very disimpassioned, disengaged, shared some facts about the company, and was done. And so when we debriefed, I was like, I'm actually a little confused, because we talked about this company, and I know you're excited about this company, but your answer did not feel interested, excited. I mean, it felt like you don't want to work there to me. And she was like, oh, okay, that's a problem. And so as we were talking, I said to her, what do you feel is your calling? And she said, I really feel called to work with issues of mental health. And I was like, I was like, what is the connection between this company and mental health? And she said, well, there is a connection. And I said, well, what is it? And she said, for me, it's all about giving time back to people. She said, doing something like your laundry is a giant time waste in my mind. And so anytime I could work for a company that's giving time back to people, in that way, they can do whatever they want. They can spend it with loved ones. They can exercise. They can meditate. They can do a hobby. They can do whatever they want with that time, because our company is giving them time back. And I looked at her and I said, say that. Say that's why you want to work for the company. And so that is a way I think we can think about how do we use these statements to connect in a more aspirational way, and not just in the details of the job and what we'll do. So with that, I want to give us maybe 3 minutes on the clock you can turn your paper over, and this statement is on the back of your paper. And to the best of your ability, seek to fill out this statement. So, my calling and mission is to use. What do you want to use? What strengths or skills or motivators in your life do you want to use in order to do what? So we're going to put 3 minutes on the clock. This is just a draft. It's your first draft to get something on paper. All right. I'm going to give you, let's see, 2 more minutes, and to turn to your partner and just share your statement with them. And partner, if you have any questions about, hey, what does this mean or what does that mean? You can ask a question.
I may be able to
Yes.
All right, did writing out the statement surface any questions for you about this process?
I don't have a question, but I was just sharing with her that I feel confident and I feel good about after this process because honestly I thought that this is my calling, but maybe because of the career aspect and the market need, I need to change this. But maybe I need not change my calling, but find out a way to reach where I want to.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. That's perfect. That's the perfect application of defining a calling. That's great. There's this whole body of literature called job crafting. It might be interesting to read about. So job crafting is about changing 3 parts of your job. It can be changing how you perceive and think about your job, changing the tasks that you do in your job, and changing the relationships in your job. So the people you work with or the quality of those relationships. And so it's the idea that every job can be bent, but sometimes you bend it and break it. You can't bend it that far. But to the degree that you can bend a job that you're in, or is another way that I think you can get at that. And then maybe the next job you have to bend less. That's great. How about anyone else? Any other questions, or if you just had observations like that you want to share?
I have an observation that might lead to a question.
Okay, sounds good.
So, in writing this, it feels like very broad to me, and like very grandiose almost. And maybe that's just because that's what I want to do is like grandiose things. But then when talking with potential employers and they like this comes up, it feels like almost like vulnerable for me to be like, this is what I want to do, and like these great grand terms. So like, how would I go about capturing the essence of like, this is what I want to do, but also like crafting it to whatever I'm applying for?
Would you mind sharing the statement? Is that a big risk? Or maybe just an element of it? Okay.
So it's not very formalized. I'm just kind of word vomiting here. But I wrote down, so my calling and mission is to use my privilege, skills, and knowledge or empathy, again, vague, in order to, and I wrote down 2 of these, impact the lives of those who the system is built against or are forgotten, and then 2, to increase the opportunities of individuals who haven't traditionally been given a fair shot in life.
Great. So let me run with it a little bit and answer your question. So I would envision you probably applying to jobs at organizations that have a similar set of values, right? So that would probably be the starting point. That it's not a setting where that wouldn't be valued at all, or it's not useful for some reason, right? So we start there. And when they ask you, why are you interested in working for this job, I think you can draw from their mission as well. So the first thing that draws me here is your mission. Let's say it's this organization, MLT, of helping traditionally marginalized groups find their way into fantastic MBA programs. I love that mission. It resonates with my personal values, which are related to affording people empathy who haven't really been given empathy in the past, and helping people develop pathways to really be able to achieve big goals in their lives and be a part of removing the barriers that help them achieve their goals. And because that's what your organization is about, it so richly aligns to my values, which is part of my decision to go to Penn and get the degree I did, and you kind of weave that story together. And so I think when you're answering a question about why you want to work at a company, I always encourage students to have two themes in the answer. One is this aspirational answer that we just talked about, and then the second theme is more the day-to-day. Because you don't want to leave them feeling like, okay, like I'm glad you like that, but you're applying to be an accountant. Do you like that? Or whatever the job is. So being able to say, and to be able to use my skills as whatever it is, a program manager, use my project management skills, or to use my one-on-one advising skills, to work with people one-on-one, to help move them along in this application pathway is something I really want to do with my time. So we're kind of weaving together this aspirational, motivational piece with the day-to-day. Something that the British do, I think is really interesting, is they don't call cover letters, they call them motivational letters. And it's more about, it's more about, and it's more about this sense of why are you motivated for this job? Whereas in the US, a cover letter is basically a narrative form of your resume. It just seems like such a waste of time because we already have your resume. So to have you write about your resume in a narrative, I think it's a waste of time. And it's why a lot of companies actually aren't using cover letters anymore. But yeah, it's this kind of getting at the motivations. And I think those are standout candidates, right? When you're really deeply showing that you would be passionate about this, because then the selection committee is like, wow, this really taps into your motivations, because they're trying to hire people that fit and that want to work hard. So that's how it all weaves together in my mind. Yeah. How about others? Yeah, any questions or observations from writing out your statement? Okay. And something else that you brought up was it feels grandiose, and I think some of the aspects of the calling is it's not meant to be small. Like I want to be like a level 28 at Penn doing this job, something like that, where it's hyper specific. So it's meant to be something that can connect the dots of your career over time, and out of that will become more specific goals. Right, you talk about like long-term goals, short-term goals, or distal goals. So the calling and mission statement is really about something you're really committing yourself to over a period of probably a time across your career. And then there will be smaller goals along the way, whether it's the goal of a certain job at a certain organization, or the goal of building out a new skill or developing a skill further. Right, you mentioned public speaking. Well, that's a whole elaborate skill set for you to develop over many years and really master that element. So that's another thing that the calling and mission statement helps you to do, is it helps you to start defining both developmental goals and incremental goals towards being able to live out your calling. So I think that's how they play together. And another thing we've been talking about is having different jobs over time. I think we hit a point where many of us where you do a job for a period of time and you've kind of mastered that and you've made the contributions you want to make, and now you're curious maybe about a different population of students or a different type of college setting. Being at an Ivy League university is different than being at a Division I sports school, which is very different from being at a community college. And you may come to a point of like, I've worked with this type of student for a really long time. I'm kind of interested in taking what I know and bringing it to a new population and having these new challenges. So again, it's this kind of the same calling, but it becomes a different setting that we want to do that in. Anything else on your minds in regard to calling or the activities we've done?
I have a question.
Sure.
So when we talk about the value for finding a career, that is like financial reward, making contribution to society, etc. So when I doing this, I put making contribution to society at first, helping people out at second. Third one is a sense of achievement. So when I talk about this with my friend, he say we need to put financial reward at first, because if you are not rich, the contribution you can make for society is limited. He also said if I just going to be a special children teacher, the contribution I can make is very limited because I can only influence people around me. But for the whole picture, like there are lots of kids are suffering in Africa and other places in the world. If I'm not rich enough, I cannot help them out. So he said, I need to put financial reward at the first. So I'm struggling. Now I don't know what's my next step to be.
So one of the thoughts that popped into my head is, I don't think Mother Teresa had a salary. I don't think Gandhi had a salary. And think about the impact that they made in the world. So not disagreeing, just another thing to consider.
Right.
And there's a book titled Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow. And the concept is, if you're doing something that you're passionate about, it doesn't mean you're going to be a millionaire necessarily, but that you will do well and be compensated for doing well and have opportunity to advance, and you'll make a salary that will support your lifestyle.
Yeah, I think those are great responses.
Yeah.
I think we have to be careful too of letting someone else put their values on us. So your friend has a value of financial gain and wealth, and great. And maybe he wants to be a philanthropist and give money away and start programs. Great. Like, that's great for him. But don't feel like you need to internalize that and that needs to be your value system, right? I have a friend who graduated from Penn GSE and he owns his own education company now. But he was sharing, as a child, he had a lot of trouble learning to speak and had a speech impediment.
Yeah.
And I just think, well, there was a special education teacher who sat with him, probably at chairs like this, and worked over and over and over with him to learn how to speak. I mean, she made a huge impact in his life in a way that somebody who's giving money, it's different. It's a different type of impact. And now he came to our university and got his master's degree here as well, and owns his own education company where he's helping a good number of children, probably not tens of thousands, but here in the area. He's based in Philadelphia. He's making an impact in kids' lives. And so, yeah, giving money is a way to have an impact, but so is being able to sit down and I mean, the trajectory of his life was completely changed by those teachers. So don't let someone else diminish that contribution by saying it's only one person or 10 people or 500 people when it could be 500,000 people, because the impact in those 500 people is deep, and now he's having an impact into others.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other last thoughts or questions you want to ask while we're together? All right, well, I'll close out with just a few other pieces of advice. I would make a digital copy of your calling statement somewhere. Maybe type it into a note on your phone or take a picture of it. And I would really encourage you to revisit it periodically. That this will be a statement that you'll be able to clarify over time, and there'll be inflection points to clarify. Maybe you're in a job search. Or I once had a friend who worked in career services. This is really a really funny thing, is every year on her birthday, she would redo her resume. Which is a funny thing. It was just like this ritual of like her birthday was when she would redo her resume. So maybe having some kind of ritual where you bring this out and really have a time where you reflect on the direction of your career and try to make sure you're on track with where you want to be on track. So don't let this be something that you just put away somewhere, but have it somewhere where it's retrievable. Because its usefulness to you is in kind of the decisions you're making about your career, the management of your career. But I think as you are all getting ready to graduate and you'll be interviewing, I think being able to pull from these themes will make you a really standout candidate. So it's been great to be with you today.